Economists understand this. A survey of the American Economic Association found 90% of economists say minimum wage increases unemployment. And you've called it a great tool of racism.
Yeah. And matter of fact, some years ago, I wrote a book called South Africa's War Against Capitalism. And I did a study of labor markets in South Africa. And white racist unions in South Africa that would never have a black as a member were the major supporters of minimum wage laws for blacks. And their stated purpose was to protect white workers from having to compete with low-skilled, low-wage black workers.
Let's now talk about welfare. Again, when I talk to people on the street, most everyone said there ought to be government handouts for needy people. People
Definitely.
need the help?
Yes, of course, especially in this economy.
But 25 years ago, Walter Williams pointed out government handouts encourage people not to try.
They may never learn to pull themselves out of poverty one step at a time. Like some giant drug pusher, their government has lured them into dependency on a system that will maintain them in permanent poverty. In every respect, welfare has backfired.
Government's like a giant drug pusher?
Oh, that's absolutely right. The welfare state has done to black Americans what slavery could not have done, the harshest Jim Crow laws and racism could not have done, namely, break up the black family. That is, today, just slightly over 30% of black kids live in two-parent families. Historically, from 1870s on up to about 1940s, and depending on the city, 75 to 90% of black kids live in two-parent families. Illegitimacy rate is 70% among blacks, where that is unprecedented in our history. Now, it's not just a matter of a racial thing. In Sweden is the mother of the welfare state, and illegitimacy in Sweden is 54%.
And why does a welfare state create illegitimacy?
Well, because, look, if you subsidize anything, you're going to get surpluses of it. And if you tax something, you're going to get less of it. If you did not get welfare, then people would decide, I'm going to go out and get a job. I'm going to live more responsibly.
I'm going to get married before I have children.
That's right, yeah.
But the welfare state actually discouraged some men from marrying the woman.
Oh, yes.
She would lose the check.
That's right. The government has said to many young women, I am the father. Yeah, and so the black males have become dispensable.
Black illegitimacy was 19% in 1940, but it skyrocketed during the Great Society, and now it's over 70%.
Yeah, it's over, and that's a heck of a start in life. That is, to be born, you don't know who or where your father is. That's not really a great start in life.
All right, let's move on to licensing laws. Now, again, this is something that people tend to like. And outside this studio, just out there, are 10,000 yellow taxis. And it's intuitive to think that government should license those cabs, make sure they're safe, make sure the drivers are competent, limit the number of them so you don't have chaos out there. And they do license taxis here in New York. They license them to death. You can't just buy a cab and start picking up passengers. You have to buy a license from another cab company, and that now costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Regulation itself has priced poor people out of the taxi business. And again, Dr. Williams saw that years ago.
I drove a cab back in 1957 for a while. I made about $125 a week. The drivers in Philly now tell me they make about $250 a week.
They could make much more if they owned their own cabs.
But what stops them? It's the thousands of federal and state regulations that are imposed on the U.S. economy. Sometimes getting a license requires a friend in the business. All those licensing laws do just one thing: keep outsiders out.
I mean, I can see when a medallion in New York now costs $600,000, it keeps poor people out. But are you saying just have no licensing, let anybody hang out a shingle, just go by, offer to pick people up? That frightens people.
Well, compare New York City, where a license to own and operate a taxi is $603,000 as of last year. Well, there are not many black-owned taxis in New York City. You go to Washington, D.C., and you see most of the taxis are owned by blacks. And so can you say, oh, well, there's Washington, D.C. is just a wonderful city for blacks. No, it takes $200 in order to get a license to own and operate one taxi. And that makes the difference.
The unintended consequences of well-intended regulation hurting the people that the politicians claim to be helping.
I don't think that they're unintended. That is, what incumbents want to do, they want to keep outsiders out so they can charge higher prices, and they make payoffs to politicians.